quick thank you to our sponsors for making this podcast possible. They keep this show free to listen to. Hi, I'm Michelle, a mother of 2 teens. 13 years ago, I traded in punishments and rewards for connection. Now I prioritize relationship over behaviors, utilize play as a parenting tool, and set limits with empathy instead of consequences. Each week, I share my journey and interview clients, experts, and followers. Thanks for joining me on the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining me on the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm Michelle, and I have a guest today, and I'm so excited because I haven't got to meet her in person, and I see her on Instagram, and I'm like, I know this woman, and I love her content, and let me get her on here. And so this is such a treat. Welcome, Shelly Robinson, to Peace and Parenting podcast. How are you?
I am so glad to be here, and I'm so glad that we get to meet under these circumstances.
So tell us, where can people find you? What are you all about? What do you teach? Tell us everything.
Yeah, I would love to. So I am the founder of Raising Yourself. I'm on Instagram and Facebook right now, working on getting on TikTok, not quite there yet. And I am hugely passionate about reparenting yourself. I'm a certified conscious parenting coach. And I got into reparenting yourself and that topic and inner child work about 10 years ago when my son was about 2. I was struggling with the yelling and the punishing and all of the kind of punitive approaches of parenting that just kind of came naturally. I put that in quotes. That was my default wiring, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't feel good about it. And I couldn't quite get to like the root cause of what was going on there. And I just got really curious and interested in what was behind that. And I kind of fell into this whole concept of reparenting yourself. And so I kind of took it from there.
Yeah. You and I have a similar story. I did the same thing, but I waited until my sweet daughter was 5.
Yeah.
I did a lot of the, yelling and shaming and timeouting and all the things that, I look back and I'm like, oh, I wish I would have known a different way to go. But
yeah.
And so we just do our best to keep moving forward. So where should we go with this road rage? Mom rage. Not road rage. Mom rage. Where does it come from and how can we work on it?
Yeah. I don't think there's like a really neat and tidy answer to this, right? I mean, I would be so nice if we could just say, oh, it's this. And if you do that, then it's going to be so easy. But I'm going to share like a little bit of my personal story, share some common things I hear from people in my community. But I want to just preface that with like, it's not always like this black and white kind of conversation, right? And we know that on social media, like nuance goes to die. I love having this opportunity to kind of like tease things apart, right?
I know people are like, but you didn't say this. I'm like, I know I can't say everything. I'm sorry. I can't say it all.
Yeah. I know. It's so hard. So I think mom rage for so many of us it can come from a couple of different places. Underneath the rage and the rage of so many people, not just moms, but for kids and adults in general is fear, right? We're afraid of something. There's something that we're bumping up against that is like a really big insecurity or a terror that we're just like, absolutely not. I am not going to be vulnerable to acknowledging this fear. And I'm going to shield it with my rage. Right. And these are not conscious, like things that we're doing. Right. It's just all kind of just like whooshes up. Right. And comes out. And I'll just share a quick story to kind of bring that to life as an example. So when my son was 4-ish, 5-ish, he and I were having this argument. I vividly remember, I don't know if you remember like any parenting moments where you just like, you'll never forget it. And it's not a good one.
I remember a lot of those.
Yeah, I remember a lot of them. But this one, it was kind of like my turning point for like, whoa, you got to like rein this in, Shelly, because I don't want that to happen again. So we were arguing about either showering or brushing teeth. I'm not sure which, but some sort of hygiene thing that, of course, a 4-year-old little boy was like, no, thank you. I'm not interested, right? Like totally normal. But it just kept happening and he wasn't listening to me. And I just became enraged. Like it was, I don't know, the 7th or 8th time. And I did not feel heard. So I want you to like, remember those phrases. Was not listening to me, did not feel heard. And little Shelly just came roaring out at him, but except I was much scarier because I'm a grown up and I have much more power and like resources and authority over him. And I just screamed at him and it was horrible. And it wasn't one of those like yelling, like my voice kind of got louder and a little bit louder. It was just like, it was 0 to 60. And then I slammed his door. I had like a full on adult tantrum. And I was like, oh my God, what was that? Like I felt immediate shame. Right. But it was like his not listening was like poking at this wound that I had about never feeling heard.
Yes, I
And I
am
was
that
like,
same
how
one.
dare you not hear me? That hurts little Shelly. And that's who was like, stepping forward in that moment. So I didn't understand all of that at the time. I just felt like a terrible person and a terrible mom. But I remember vividly thinking, I do not want to do that again. Because of course, I don't know if you have seen Monsters Inc., but do you remember there's a scene where like that Sully, I think, screams at the little boy and like his face. And that's like my little boy. It's like the face I'll never forget. He was just so scared of me in that moment. And I just really remember thinking, I cannot like lose control like that again.
I think this is so common too. I had that same trigger, right? Where I need to feel heard because I was never felt heard as a kid, right? I'll get louder and bigger and stronger and whatever. And I think it's a testament to if you listen to your kids when they're young, they won't, hopefully, well, they will sometimes, but hopefully
Yeah.
they won't have that need to feel heard so much when they're parenting.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's amazing how that gets wired in at such a young age. It's fascinating and it can be used for better or for worse, right? We can wire in like, yeah, your voice matters. Yes, there's space for you to disagree here. Yes, we can hold two different viewpoints and have a conversation about it versus like, you're smaller than me. You have less power. You don't know any better. Shut your mouth. I don't care.
Yeah.
We have the option to wire those two things. And again, it's not that black and white, right?
No.
I mean, I'm still messing up and I'm still like, but I'm trying to make that the exception. Like the things where like my kids are like, I'm not on my best behavior as a parent. I'm not trying to make that.
Yeah. I think they noticed that. I know that my older daughter's 18 and I say, what was the worst thing mommy did when you were young? And she's like, you didn't do anything. And I was like, what? You don't remember me doing? You don't remember time out? You don't remember yelling in your face just like that? You don't remember me yanking you out of the pool? You don't remember any of that stuff? And she's like, no, I don't remember it. And it's like, but by the way, I have not been perfect since I started this. I've been on a journey myself and yelled plenty of times and messed up plenty of stuff. But I think if you do most of it okay, that's what they remember.
Right. Right. And honestly, I don't think kids want to grow up with a perfect parent.
No.
Like, I mean, that's damaging in and of itself. Like we're allowed to be
no
human.
perfect parent, but I think the idea is that if we don't want them to grow up with a parent who thinks they're perfect.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, oh, nothing they did is wrong. And it's all, super excusable as opposed to making amends with people.
Right. Right.
This trigger piece too, I have this trigger and I don't know if you do, but maybe some other people do. This idea of not being good enough or worthy, right? My child does something that's wrong.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, no, it has to stop because that's a reflection of me as a mom.
Yeah.
But I can't possibly have made this mistake because mistakes were so, thought poorly of in my own household. And so I beat myself up and then I would, go to beat my kid up because I needed them to do better in order to make me feel better because I felt like I was failing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. I also have that trigger and I definitely have had to work through my children's behavior not being a reflection of my worth. Because I mean, I know in those moments where I'm like, how dare they? And what's wrong with me that I've cultivated this like type of behavior in them? My ego is like in the front seat. My ego is like, oh, like, I can't believe your kid behaves like this. You are such a bad mom.
Yeah.
When really they're just probably doing something developmentally appropriate. They're human. They're allowed to be like, dysregulated and overwhelmed and snarky. That happens sometimes, right?
And then, I get a lot of comments on like, well, you're creating entitled kids.
Yeah.
That's a common like traditional ideology. Like if you don't shut it down, right? If you don't make it go away,
right?
You accept it, then you have an entitled child and you have to make that stop in order to kids that aren't entitled, that's a hard one too.
It is. And I think that statement comes a lot from parents or adults who aren't willing to first examine their own mistakes and their own behavior, right? Because when kids are like misbehaving or acting out, like our job as parents is to say, I wonder what's going on there.
Wow.
Like we're going to make a generous assumption, right? And when we make mistakes, though, what we often struggle, there's a disconnect. Like if I mess up, I've had to overrate my inner critic that usually says, you idiot, what's wrong with you? Why can't you get this right? So before we like worry about how we respond to our kids' behavior, I'm not saying we should not worry about that, but we have to first start with how we respond to our own little adult tantrums and our own like outbursts. And, if I'm being like snarky with my husband or if I'm using a rude tone with my kids, if I instantly shame myself, is that going to like make the situation? No, I'm going to be like, gee, Shelly, like, are you like stressed today or what's going on? Did you not sleep well? Like, what do you need? So I try to practice that with myself first so that when my kids misbehave, I'm like approaching it, it just spills over naturally.
Time for a short break to acknowledge our sponsors. Because of them, you're able to enjoy this podcast without paying a dime. You know what I don't miss at all? The vicious week before my period. I always used to feel like I was walking in quicksand and craving the most unhealthy of foods. My sleep was always off and my moods were unpredictable. Now it's easier to manage PMS with Estro Control. Happy Mammoth, the company that created Hormone Harmony, is dedicated to making women's lives easier. And that means using only science-backed ingredients that have been proven to work for women. They make no compromise when it comes to quality, and it shows. And the biggest benefit, feeling like myself again. That's what women mention over and over in their reviews. And there are over 14,000 reviews of Hormone Harmony. For a limited time, you can get 15% off the entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use code PEACE at checkout. That's happymammoth.com and use the code PEACE for 15% off today. This episode is sponsored by ByHeart. ByHeart features a patent protein blend that gets closest to breast milk. Their formula includes the most abundant protein, alpha-lac, found in breast milk, as well as lactoferrin, the number one protein found in colostrum. ByHeart is an easy-to-digest formula which includes prebiotics and an 80-20 whey-to-casein ratio like in early breast milk, making it great for a newborn's digestive system. ByHeart is the only U.S.-made infant formula made with certified clean ingredients, including organic, grass-fed, whole milk, not skim. What it doesn't have is soy, corn syrup, GMOs, or palm oil. Curious about ByHeart? Redeem your welcome offer at byheart.com/podcast. Use code PEACE for a limited time. Additional terms and conditions apply. Okay, back to the show.
And I think there's this other idea too, which you're kind of brushing up against too, is this like, the idea of respect is like, I've realized just recently, I had a couple of respect posts and they kind of had, there's this general idea that kids need to be respectful and then say and do things that are not kind or are dysregulated, that somehow they're disrespectful. I used to think that, and sometimes I still do. And I think what it is for me is that I get you said ego wounded.
Yeah.
I feel like they are embarrassing me, saying something that makes me look bad.
Well, they're wrong.
A lot of parents, if they really stop to think for just a few minutes, they might get there too. Like it's not disrespect. They actually respect you. You felt disrespected because you allowed them to scratch at your ego.
Yes. Yes. And you know what? I feel like, yes, I have definitely brushed up against that. And I've gotten, as I've improved, where I still need improvement is when my kids like push back against someone who's not me, even if they're doing it respectfully, like parents or in-laws or teachers, and they say it like totally respectfully, but it's still kind of like not expected in society, right? For a kid to be like, why are you asking me to do that? I'm just like, can you give me a reason? And, or, even if they're not like, they're still mastering that skill, right? So sometimes it comes out a little bit like, not ideal.
Not quite right.
My ego is like, oh my God, they all think that I'm raising a brat, And
well, that's it. Then like society has really held us accountable for our child's actions. And so we feel like if they misstep in society, that somehow it's our fault or somehow they'll be judged and I'll be judged. And I just wish there was a more accepting general idea around children and their behavior.
Right. Like if my kids push back against me and they do it rudely, then we have a conversation about it. But like, I think that happens out in the wild and it's automatic. Like, what a bunch of crappy parents raising entitled brats. Like all these sweeping statements that just make people feel better about themselves
Yeah.
by putting other people down.
Yeah. Or it's like, I think it's really hard to accept the fact. I think it's been really said in society, kids kind of need to be perfect,
Yeah.
behave. And it's really hard for people to say they can mess up.
Right.
The wrong thing. And that is actually okay and developmentally super appropriate. And even if it doesn't look the way you want it to look,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's really hard. It's all very hard.
It is. And I know you talk a lot, Michelle, about punishment and how it's not really productive or useful. And I do too. Like that's something you and I know share a lot of like passion around. And something I always say, and that I have to constantly remind myself is like kids don't have to suffer in order to learn. And I think that's like just this big weed we just need to like rip out of society. And I always say like the only way to rip that weed out is the first like look at yourself and look back at your childhood and say, I didn't deserve to suffer in order to learn. Like, and that is I think people can sometimes get on board with the first one. And the second one, though, they're like, no,
I needed
deserve
to.
that. I was wild.
Spanked.
Yeah.
I needed to be, it got me in line. And
Yeah.
it's like, but you can get in line and learn things and be remorseful and get to amends and like be a moral person without it.
Yeah.
We don't need to. And I don't know necessarily if punishment actually teaches morality. I think that's another understanding. That's a conventional idea. Like punishment teaches morality. Why do we think that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think punishment just teaches kids how to not get caught next time.
Yeah. Or it teaches them to punish other people.
That's right. Yeah. It's all sorts of things like
It
splinter
really
off.
is. And it might keep them from doing the thing because of fear, right? Or whatever.
Right.
But it's definitely not long-term helping them develop.
Right. Right. And I think, something that helps to kind of keep me grounded when like punishment is tempting or, like it's like thinking about emotional regulation as a skill, just like riding a bike is a skill, right? No kid is born and is like knows how to do that. It's a skill that we're all developing for a lifetime. And so we wouldn't punish a kid for falling off their bike. And I know it's not entirely apples to apples, but it really is.
Yeah.
And the only way you learn that really like and can internalize it and embody it is in connection and in relationship with people that are guiding you, right?
That are allowing you to fail. Because I get this question. I get this idea also like, well, the real world is going to punish them.
Yeah.
Great. Let the real world punish them because there's nothing we can do about that. And they understand that the moment they go to the playground, someone takes the toy from them.
Yeah.
And so do we want to have that be part of our most loving and endearing and wonderful relationship, punishment?
Right. Right.
The one place where you can screw up and I'm going to let you get to your own remorse.
Right.
That's your punishment.
Yeah.
Get to your own remorse and see how you feel about it.
Right. And that kind of bumps up against this idea, like about how we assume kids are wired. Like, do we think kids are born rotten and bad? And like some people very much do. Absolutely. Yeah. And so you have to keep chipping away.
The baby is born rotten. They're so sweet. They don't have any inkling to be mean to you.
Right.
But my dad even said, when I first had my daughter, he was like, well, don't pick her up. You're going to spoil her because she's just trying to manipulate you. And I was like, what? Are you insane? She's 2 weeks old.
Right.
Are you crazy?
Right.
That is a very real idea that exists in our world.
Right.
And so unraveling it and saying, no, guys, this 100 years of thinking is wrong.
Yeah.
Very hard for folks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, let's get back to the yelling. What are some things that you've done to try to help yourself move away from, your own dysregulation?
Yeah. So I, over the years, have really just honed in on a few phrases that they're on repeat now. And I just want to say that they were not on repeat at the beginning. So I'm going to share this. But if you hear this and you go try this today, please be patient with yourself because just because you now have these in your back pocket doesn't mean they like magically work. But it takes a lot of practice. So one of them is, and I know this is not unique to me, but like, this is not an emergency. So when my kid is, ruffling my feathers and my little ego's getting its feelings hurt, I can now notice the physical sensations in my body. That's step one. I'm like noticing that I'm getting hot and my heart's starting to pick up a little bit. And those are cues that I'm going to freak out if I don't like rein this in. So I say, this is not an emergency. And I literally pretend that I'm like in quicksand. So I can just like slow down, right? Just like mommy is getting a little bit irritated and this is not an emergency and I need a break, and it's like almost theatrical. It's like almost ridiculous, but I do it more for myself and my kids. It's almost like they know, they're like, okay, mommy's about to, you know, but, but I don't. And they know that's kind of like my cue to slow down and their cue to like pause. So that's one thing. Another thing I silently say to myself is they're a good kid and I'm a good mom. It's just kind of like constantly like just cultivating that generous assumption about them and me. Like we're both having a hard time and we're both good. Yeah. And that's okay. And then the third thing is like, we can solve this together, right? So we don't have to do this. We don't have to be like this. Like we can figure this out together. So whatever it is, like an example from my life recently is like getting into these silly arguments with my daughter about what to eat for breakfast in the morning. Like really silly, right? But just, it's so annoying. It was becoming really annoying to me. And I started to feel like I could feel that like enemy mindset creeping in. Like, why is she doing this to me? Why can't she just eat some toast? And then I was like, you know what? I feel like we can figure this out together. Like, I wonder if we can like figure this out. And so what we ended up doing, and I'm not saying this would work for everyone in every family, but what worked for us was we both brainstorm all the breakfast options that we have, like typically in our house, right? Like cereal and toast and eggs and like the things, like 5 things that we rotate. We put them on a menu and she's very artistic. So she made this beautiful menu and put it on like she painted it and it was so pretty and she put it on our fridge. And now in the mornings we like we pretend we're like in a restaurant. And she's like, I think I'll make this. And she helps me. Like she's 8. So she's not like
so cute.
So it worked out because I went away, like I moved away from that enemy and more like the collaborative. So those are like 3 things I try to hang on to.
Your first one, I teach that all the time to people because I feel like when we slow ourselves, and I love it's not an emergency. Did it come from Dr. Laura Markham?
I do not know. I mean, I remember, I don't know. I feel like I've probably read that
a million times. I've heard it from her a million times. I always attribute it to Dr. Laura Markham. That's where I heard it.
Okay.
I don't know if that's right or not, but I remember her voice and just the way she talks to people.
Yeah.
Not an emergency. And it's okay. And I was like, oh, if I could just embody her like whole demeanor. And you're right. And I would always say like, I'm walking slow. I'm moving slow. I'm moving slow. Mine was always the sibling rivalry, right? I could hear.
Yes.
And I would traditionally run in like, what's going on? What are you doing? And then I was just like, I'm going to walk as slow as I can to that sibling rivalry. I don't care if it escalates. I need to slow my body down.
Yes. Yeah.
Really, really helps, actually. I can't believe how much just that one thing helps.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if we can get our bodies slowed down, then everything else kind of follows.
Yeah. Too. And that 4-4-4 breathing really helped. I would try to breathe that 4 in, hold 4, 4 out, hold empty 4 while I was walking. That totally helped me too. But I needed that stuff. If I didn't have it, I wouldn't have been able to change it, I don't think.
Right. Oh, another one, Michelle, is that it's probably my favorite one that I just say to myself is I want to feel good on the other side of this.
Ooh, I like that one.
That's probably my favorite. And I remember thinking that in the moment when I was super mad, I like getting annoyed with one of my kids and I could like flash forward to feeling regret and shame and being like, why did I do that? And I was like, no, I'm going to feel like I was like determined, I was like, I'm going to feel good about this. And I'm going to make a conscious decision right now that I'm going to like look back on this moment and be like, good job. You did it. You did it. Yeah.
One other thing too, I just thought of too, is that I always like to think is like, I want the upset to remain with them.
Yeah.
Then I can stay with the child.
Yes.
Do not need to have my other tantrum in the middle of their tantrum.
Right.
So and I think I thought of that because of what you said. Like if I could do that, then at the end, I'm like, they were mad, but I wasn't.
Right.
I left it with them. Now they get to do with what they want with it. They get to learn from it. They get to mull it over. They get to decide if they want to make amends. It's theirs. I did the whole experience and make it about my ego.
I love that. I know. It's like when you say that, like the image that pops into my mind is like passing this hot potato of pain or anger back and forth. It's like, no, you take it. No, you take it. And like as parents, we have to be able to be like, I'm gonna help you actually extinguish the fire in that potato. Now we're getting really sideways with this analogy, but, it's just like meeting their fire to fire. Like it doesn't help.
Yeah. Oh, Shelly, this was so good. I'm so glad we got to connect.
Oh,
We have a lot of similarities.
I know. I adore your work. Thank you.
Me
Thank
too.
you for your
Every time I
voice.
see your posts, I'm like, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Same. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. Well, where tell us again where we can find you.
Yeah, I am on Instagram under Raising Yourself and Facebook, and my website's shellyrobinson.com.
Amazing. Go check her out. If you don't, then you are missing out on a big piece of Instagram that you might like. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining me on the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm so glad you were here. We'll see you next time.